by Cowen, Christopher Cowen. He was the second owner of Woodville. And I love the uniform. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Well, the first thing I'll ask is, who has been to the Neville House at all? Those who didn't raise your hands, after I'm done speaking, you will probably want to come and see us. Because the Neville House, that you, as you see it today, was actually what was left after the Whiskey Rebellion. The rebels had burnt John Neville's home up on top of Bower Hill, up where essentially where Providence Point is at now, and Kane Hospital, that area up there. So, who has heard of Christopher Cowen, other than the bio that I had Lisa present? Does anybody know who Christopher Cowen was? Doesn't surprise me. Christopher Cowen, just real briefly before we get into any detail, he was actually the Andrew Carnegie of his era. He was born in 1780 and came to the United States in 1800. His family, let's see this one. Can everybody in the back hear me? Okay. No?
Yeah,
Okay.
you need to.
Okay. Let me turn this on.
Do you need help?
Okay. Right. Yep. Thank you. So any better? Okay, very good. So Christopher Cowen came to the United States in 1800 from Ireland, specifically Northern Ireland. So how many folks can trace their origin back to Northern Ireland at all? Not one. Okay. Well, we're all probably a little bit Irish in heart anyway, so so am I. So if I go on for too long, don't let an Irishman get on his soapbox. You know how we'll go on. But anyway, so Christopher Cowen came to the United States. He had some money. He didn't come to the United States as many immigrants did, a poor man. His family in Ireland was in the textile business, specifically wool. And as everybody knows, Ireland is full of sheep, and a lot of textile business was in wool. Very little in flax, which is essentially used to make linen, which is essentially what my clothing today is made out of, either linen or wool. So that was the material of the day. But anyway, so Christopher Cowen, back to him. He started making his money. He opened a small facility. First of all, he is who brought steam power to Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, before Christopher, everybody knew about it. Of course, there was Robert Fulton, who invented the steam engine and all the steamboats. But Christopher Cowen actually brought the steam engine to Pittsburgh, and they were able to begin using that to drive the piles for all of the docks and piers and everything along the rivers in the city of Pittsburgh. But one of the other things that Christopher Cowen did with his steam power, he had a 70 horsepower steam engine, 70 horsepower steam engine that he was able to use to power a mill that he had. And in that mill where he started to really make money, because you got to remember, the city of Pittsburgh's growing. So what do they need? They need things to make buildings and implements for their fields. So his first adventure was to make a machine that made cut nails. before that period, if you've ever been to any kind of reenactment or a period fair, you'll see blacksmiths making nails. And it takes about maybe 15, 20 seconds to make a nail by a blacksmith. Well, Christopher Cowen was able to make many thousands of nails, and that's where he started to make his money. And in 1810, he started to make even more money. And he happened to meet a young lady at the same time. Her name was Eliza Kirkpatrick. Does anybody know the significance of the Kirkpatrick name in Pittsburgh history? Okay. He was also friends with John Neville. And there were many people that didn't know who Mr. Kirkpatrick was, but he was essentially he was a bigwig in the city of Pittsburgh. Mr. Kirkpatrick and Mr. Neville, being actually brothers-in-law, they lived along the Monongahela River, essentially in the area where Market Street is at today. You come out to the Boulevard of the Allies, they all had townhouses along the river. They were called the Neville Connection. So the significance of that is Christopher Cowen happens to be Eliza Kirkpatrick. And since he has some money, he is allowed into the society of people that actually have money. And he became what is known as the gentry class. Gentry class back then were people that had money and didn't work for a living. Now, Christopher Cowen owned this company, but other people worked for him. So he was allowed into the gentry class, as it were. And so in 1810, he marries Eliza Kirkpatrick, and they're living in the city of Pittsburgh. Everybody, all of the rest of the Neville connection are living there along the river. So you wonder why we have a house out here, and John Neville had a home up on top of Bower Hill. Those were their summer homes, folks. They even had summer homes back then. In the wintertime, they spent the entire winter and early spring and probably late fall, they went to their townhouses in Pittsburgh. So Christopher Cowen has this steel plant that he has, and now he's expanding it. And in 1812, he is now making farm implements and anything that can be stamped out of steel. So he's making a lot of money. He's making so much money that in 1814, he sells it. Several reasons for that. By 1814, he now has two children. He has Mary Ann, his first daughter, and James, his son, his first son. Are there any Cowen relatives, descendants here today that probably might be able to tell this story better than I? All right, then I'll continue. So anyway, Christopher Cowen in 1814 has made so much money that he decides to sell. There's several other reasons for that, of course. In 1814, after the War of 1812, there's some economics that are going on in the country that are creating a downturn. And Christopher Cowen, he was a very intelligent man, being the intelligent man that he was, got out while the getting was good. And he sold his business, and 6 months later, he bought the Neville house, Presley Neville's house. Presley and his wife have moved on. They have moved to essentially out into the Ohio country, out around Cincinnati, to a town that's now known today as Neville. So Presley Neville, John Neville's son, has left, and Christopher Cowen and Eliza now live there. Just to step back in history a little bit, Christopher Cowen knew, and Eliza, of course, knew of Nevillewood, because they were married there. Strangely enough, So was Eliza's father, Mr. Kirkpatrick, and his wife were married there. So they knew of the Neville, essentially, plantation. Little history of the Neville plantation. John Neville acquired all of that property either through grants from the government as payment for his service in the Revolution, and or just land acquisition that he speculated on before the Revolution. But anyway, so Christopher Cowen has decided he's going to become a gentleman farmer. So much so that he actually, folks in the area used to refer to him as Squire Cowen. Didn't dress like I did, like I am dressed like this all of the time, but certainly he used his knowledge and expertise to make the plantation thrive. He grew many crops, corn, rye, of which they made that famous liquor that everybody was drinking back then. Whiskey, he had a large still, and so they had essentially all of the staples that a large farm would have. Like I said, wheat, corn, rye, and animals. They had cows and steers, and many chickens, turkeys, believe it or not, swans, and many kind of fowl like that. To which they would sell that, and that's another one of his income streams that he had. He did in trade. So he didn't stop earning money when he sold his company and retired to become a gentleman farmer. But one of the other big reasons that he wanted to move out to the countryside, as it were, was the fact that Pittsburgh was dirty. He had 2 small children and didn't want them growing up in all of the smoke. Little did he know 100 years later what it would look like, but it was getting dirty even back then. So it was for reasons of health, wanting to raise his children. So he had 2 children at the time. He ended up having 7 children in 11 years. His wife was probably pregnant every year that those children, because it was from 1812 to 1821 that 7 children were born. So much so that, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it killed his wife. Because the last 2 children that were born were twins, and she died a year later. So I think the poor woman was worn out. Who could blame her? Of course, and the medical procedures of the day probably wouldn't have supported if she had a difficulty. But that sad event was one of the things that Christopher Cowen most regretted was his poor Eliza dying. If you come to the Neville house, there's actually a needle point that is in our parlor area that his daughter actually did. She was at school in Maryland. 10-year-old Mary Ann was at school, and she actually created, if you look at this thing, you'd swear it's a painting, but it's almost all needlepoint. And it's a memory of, commemoration of her mother. She could not come home for the funeral, so she did this needlepoint. It's absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But once again, Christopher Cowen, some of the things that he did to the home, when he purchased it, if you've been to Nevillewood, you'll notice we've got some big, large porches, walk-around porches that are on there. Christopher Cowan actually had those added to the home, mainly for, because back then, of course, you don't have air conditioning. I mean, it's 1812, 1814. There's no air conditioning back then. One of the ways that they were able to help cool the home was they had those porches added on there. And if you've been to the home, you know it. But they're about 14 feet deep. So they have the sun coming off the house, and you're going to have the breezes that come on, breezes that come underneath there. So much so that in the summertime, they would actually bring their beds out and sleep out outside on the porches. One of the other things that he did to the home was, today if you see it, it's one large home. The kitchen area that was the kitchen at the time was a separate building when the Nevilles lived there. Christopher Cowan actually had an addition put on the home, and it became attached to the home. When he did that, he had an additional fireplace put in the home. It is actually thank you. He had actually had a fireplace put in the home. It's actually 3 fireplaces into one chimney. Why did he do that? Because back then, excuse me, politicians were thinking about having a tax on how many chimneys you had in your home. Okay? They were also thinking about taxing how many window panes you had in your home. Who went through with that? England did. The United States did not. If you look at some of the old homes in London, ones that have survived the bombings during the Second World War, you'll see they've got a lot of bricked up windows. It's because when the tax went through, they said, we're not paying that tax. They bricked their windows up. But Christopher Cowan, like I said, if you're out at the house and you're taking a tour, you'll notice there's 3 fireplaces. One in his master bedroom that he had put on, one in the dining room, and one in the kitchen, and they're all trunked into one fireplace. Genius. Genius. A couple of the other things that he had done at the home was to have essentially I'd call it a sawmill, but they actually called it a shingle mill. So a lot of the, when they put that conservation ditch for Chartiers Creek back there, that kind of ended where that area was at. But he actually had a mill race that came off of Tom's Run and ran a sawmill and slitting mill back there. So that was another way that he made money. And he was actually, I digress. So Christopher Cowan, when he retired, he was only 35 years old when he sold his company. And he lived there for another 12 years. I'm sorry, 20 years. He died at 55 years old. Still a very young man by today's standards. Some of the things that he acquired in the home, if you come out and visit us, there's a musical instrument in the parlor, and it is called a piano forte. Does anybody know what the difference between a piano and a piano forte is?
It has significantly less keys, and it also is that, well, one plucks and one strikes the chord.
Yes, and one of the biggest differences is a piano has a cast iron sounding board. a piano forte has a wooden sounding board. And that piano forte, while not original to the home, is exactly one that Christopher Cowen had. And it was made by the Steinway of his day. So you know the guy had money. He's working with people in London, by a gentleman by the name of Clemente, and produced this piano forte. And this is actually an original for the time. There aren't too many of those left in the world. So if you want to see something that is very, very rare as far as a musical instrument, please stop and take the tour with us, and you'll be able to see that piano forte. One of the other things that we have at the house is his original his clock. It is essentially, you'd call it a grandfather clock today. He brought it with him from Ireland, and believe it or not, the doggone thing still keeps perfect time when we remember to wind it. And it's a beautiful timepiece, really, to see. Some of Christopher Cowen's neighbors that you may not be aware of and where they were at. Everybody knows where Trader Jack's is at back there, back in Presto, right? That actually belonged to a gentleman by the name of Isaac Craig. Does anybody know who Isaac Craig was? Ever hear of Craig Street in Pittsburgh? It's named after Isaac Craig. That was actually his wife's cousin. So Eliza's cousin, Nancy, Nancy Neville, was Isaac Craig's wife. They had all of that land back there where you see where Trader Jack's is at, spreading back behind where the shopping center was at. Quite a bit of land back there. But Isaac Craig, actually, a little history on Isaac Craig. He was he started the artillery school during the Revolutionary War. He was the commander of the Revolutionary artillery. Made his money real quickly. Made his money as a Marine. He was one of the original Marines. Anybody in here a retired Marine? You probably know who Isaac Craig was. He was one of the original Marines in the Revolutionary War. Marines were paid as pirates back then. They raided British shipping, Spanish shipping, well, sometimes when they get away with French shipping. And crews were allowed to keep 80% of what they captured. Isaac Craig never spent one penny or shillings, so to speak, back then. Never spent any of his money. So when he came home, he had lots of money. And that's why he had all that land that he had. And that's why he was invited into the Neville connection, because he had lots of money and he could have a plantation of his own back there. So that's where all of his money came from. But the size of the plantation, even when Christopher Cowen had it from the Nevilles, essentially was about half of Bower Hill. Everybody knows where the old hospital was at. All of that land up there, beautiful farmland. It was beautiful farmland when it was the hospital. A lot of the land towards Heidelberg and Carnegie, and a lot of the land down towards Bridgeville. So it's quite an expansive amount of land that he had farmed. A lot of the people that he had there were indentured servants. It was a large thing that went on back in the day, because at this particular time in history, slavery has been abolished and slaves have been released, and we're living alternate lives. But so that's who worked the land that he had, and the tradition also was carried on that John Neville had, where he would rent out his indentured servants. If somebody needed a barn built and they needed labor, those that had that owned indentured people would rent you out. And that's how you paid essentially your passage back into this country. There was no support system for coming here, and the government gives you money and gives you all kind of goodies. You actually had to work for a living. So the sad fact is Christopher Cowan died in 1835. His daughter, Mary Ann, his oldest daughter, took over the home, and she married a gentleman by the name of Renshaw. If anybody knows old ancient Pittsburgh history, Mr. Renshaw was a banker, and they were married in the home. She actually, being the oldest daughter, the oldest child, took over the home. Kind of strange. The reason that home is still there is because when they got married, Mr. Renshaw told her, he said, "Who wants this old place? I'll tear it down and build you a mansion." And something to the words of, "Like hell you will." This is my family's home. So that's where we're at today. And actually, the Neville House, as we see it today, has been occupied until 1775, when construction began on that home, until 1975, was owned by descendants of blood or marriage of the Neville family. And as your presenter today and portraying the second owner of the home, we invite you to come and visit us. We have many events throughout the year. If any of you have come for our Whiskey Rebellion presentation, where we actually fight the two battles of Bower Hill, and many other things that we have that go on. There's several ladies' teas that go on throughout the year. Please come and visit us. I thank you very much for putting up with me. And please come and visit us.